Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do an old rustic wood material that we're going to apply to some boards so that we can make a rustic wood flooring in Unreal Engine. We'll make the material in Substance Designer, we'll model the boards out, and then we'll have everything in Unreal and we'll make the material and to make a convincing rustic wood floor. And you can see the results on the screen right now. Previously we've done things with parallax occlusion mapping. We've mapped materials to flat surfaces. Now we're going to map this material to a relatively simple model to create, just a board. And it gives you all sorts of different options for how you arrange your boards, or you can build things out of them. It's actually a really neat way of doing things. So now, instead of using parallax occlusion mapping or maybe tessellation to bump up, we're going to actually have models doing the bump up. And in my experience, this is even more performative. It's kind of tricky to use POM, and it's pretty tricky to use tessellation to good effect without it and having it match up perfectly. To me, the negligible increase in polygons, you can really render a lot of polygons these days, and these are still really simple models, and I'll show you how to be efficient with it. And just a reminder, I am a very small channel, so any like, subscribe, any kind of interaction would help me a lot. We are pushing to get somewhere where I can actually continue this on. We just need to get those numbers up a little bit, and I really appreciate it. So now you can see the results of what we're getting on the screen here in Unreal, and in the future we're going to use this as another base for maybe some more decals. I know we're taking a break from decals for a minute here. And we're also going to like break apart the boards and have like splintery parts so you can see how you can have a broken board. But first we need to start with the regular boards, and here we are. So let's just head over to Substance Designer. Okay, so now here we are in Substance Designer. To get a substance graph going, you're going to want to go File, New, Substance Graph. Name it whatever you want. I named mine T-Wood Boards. Okay. And just click OK. And metallic roughness, click OK. Close that down. Now you can get rid of the outputs that are height, you can get rid of metal, and you can get rid of ambient occlusion. We're not going to be using those. The ones we're going to be using are normal, color, and roughness. All right? So now let's zoom in over here, and we're going to do our boards mask, basically masking off the position of our boards. And just a reminder to pull up nodes and search them out. You can hit the space bar and you can just search it out, and I'll let you know what we're going to be putting in. Okay? And now for each of the nodes, we're going to run from the start to the finish, and for each of them they're going to have some settings, and I'm going to run through all of the settings from start to finish. And there's always a possibility that I might miss a setting. Probably not. I'm going to try my best, but it's possible. They'll be over here on the right hand side of your screen, so you can always look over there. And when I go and edit, if I see that I miss anything, I'll make a note also. So okay, let's just get going. This is Boards Mask. We're going to start with that section here. You can see here's our whole graph. We're going to start over here. We're going to start with a shape. All right? So the shape settings are going to be pattern square, scale 1, size 1 for X, and size 0.05 for Y. Okay, we'll run that up over here to a transformation 2D. And in that, you can see it doesn't save what I made the settings, but you'll want to rotate it 90 degrees. So put 90 for the angle here. And for the width, put 12.5 and hit enter. And then you'll end up with this skinny guy here. The other thing you're going to want to turn on up here in tiling mode, you want to go to this rollout and go to absolute and set this to no tiling, because we just want one of them. All right? Otherwise it would just make a bunch of them. So we'll run that transform 2D into this tile generator grayscale, and the goal with that is just to get that on the edges of our image. So for X amount we go 1, Y amount we go 1, pattern image input. The rest of this I believe is the same all the way down. Now you can see these are just all the default settings all the way down to global offset. And then for global offset, we'll just put 0.5. Okay? And that'll put it on the edges there. All right, so that's our first tile generator. Let's take our shape and run it into another tile generator right here. Tile generator grayscale. And now for this one, we'll go back up to the top. X amount 1, Y amount 10, so we get a bunch of them. Image input for pattern. Then we'll go down. Y global offset 0.15. And that'll just move it a little bit so that we have the one on the top and the bottom there. And that'll just move it a little bit so we have our boards just right here. Just all evenly spaced. We'll run our shape into another tile generator grayscale. Let's look at that tile generator grayscale for the first one again. 0.15, and I believe that's all we set. Yep. And we'll run our shape down into another tile generator. This time X amount 1, Y amount 10, same. Image input for pattern. And I don't believe any of the other settings are changed. See, the global offset here is just 0 and 0. And everything else is just the same. Now we're going to blend those two together using a blend with a screen opacity 1. Now what that does is it's going to just put these two together and it would make a bunch of little skinny ones. But we only want a few of the skinny ones, so we're going to mask out the rest of them. So we'll have some big boards so we can put on the bigger sides of boards and the skinny ones on the skinnier sides of boards. Okay? So we'll go to a shape here. We'll make a shape. Pattern square, size 1, Y 0.33. Okay? Now we'll run this shape into a transform 2D so we can put the white more at the top. And in this transform 2D, you can see it moved it up. And we do the Y offset 0.375. We also want to set this one to no tiling, just in case some of that white comes up on the bottom there. We don't want any of that. So we go to absolute here, and then tiling mode, no tiling. And then this is the result we get. So run this up into the opacity mask of the blend, and that'll mean we're only blending the two together in this one very specific spot to get the skinny ones, and then we have also the fat ones here. So we'll take that blend, which is screen and 1, run it into another blend, which is screen and opacity 1, and we'll run our side ones that we made at the beginning into it. So the output into the top, this one into the bottom, and we'll run those together. And now we'll have this edge on the side also. And then we'll invert that to make it black and white, to switch those around to make the boards white. Okay? And then let's just warp that a little bit. So run that into a warp. Intensity 0.02, just a regular warp, and we'll do it with a purlin at scale 13, disorder 0.21. And I didn't randomize the seed. You can see a random seed up here. A lot of our noises and our maps will have this seed. And you don't necessarily need to copy mine because you'll get good results with whatever you do. With this one, we didn't change it, so we'll just warp this. And what that does is it just warps it a little bit to make it not as straight. See, straight, a little bit varied. Run this warp into another warp. This intensity is really low. It's 0.005. And you can see we're powering that with a crystal. So the crystal down here, scale 9, disorder 0. And we'll run that into the warp. That just kind of warps it even ever so slightly, makes it kind of craggy. So now let's take this warp and run this into a flood fill. Now flood fill is a very powerful node that we can do a lot of cool things with. So with flood fill, the only thing you want to make sure is you take safety speed trade-off. No failure mode down here. Otherwise I was getting weird results with the other ones. Okay, so now we're going to run this flood fill up to here into a flood fill grade scale. And now we're going to start off our section of board's height. So we're going to run this flood fill into this flood fill to grayscale here. What that does is it just variates inside of all of the different boards with gray. And so some of them, it'll make them bump out, some of them more and less, right? Because it's for a height map. So if you look down here, luminance amount 0.53, luminance random 1, and I hit the random seed a few times. Now, like I said, if you want to copy me exactly, you have to copy these random seeds. Otherwise, just do it on your own to a result that you like. So we'll take the flood fill grayscale and we'll run that into the background of this next blend. We'll run our original flood fill to a flood fill gradient. And this will just give our board some angly gradients. And the settings for the gradient, just make sure to turn angle variation all the way to 1 and then randomize the seed a little bit. So angle variation to 1. I believe all these other settings are the same. Just randomize the seed, run that into a blend, and we're going to blend that with min darken opacity 0.4. So that you can see this is the result down there. We'll run that into another blend, and we'll do another flood fill gradient. Do the same thing, put the angle variation all the way up to 1, and then hit the random seed button so it's different than the other one. And we'll blend those two together. We'll put this one on the top and the other one on the bottom, and we'll do another min darken opacity 0.4. So there you go. Now we'll take that blend and we're going to start doing our edge detail. So we'll run that into a slope blur grayscale here. You can kind of see the results of this one. It's starting to make it craggy along the edges. We'll power that with the black and white spots. Scale 2, disorder 0.58, roughness 0.61. We'll run that up into the slope of the slope blur grayscale. And this is samples 32, intensity 0.06. And you can see the results there. So we go from this to this, more craggy. Then we'll run that into another slope blur grayscale. Same thing, 32, intensity 0.1. And we'll just do a little bit different black and white spots down here. Scale 2, disorder 0.58, roughness 0.29. You can see the random seed here if you want to put that in. Otherwise, randomize it. Pop that in. So we go from this to this, adding even more cragginess to it. All right, run that into another slope blur grayscale. Samples 32, intensity 0.12. And I didn't randomize that. I guess that doesn't need to be randomized. We'll power that with the black and white spots. Scale 3, disorder 0.53, roughness 0.09. I'll run that in. Okay, even more variation there. So that slope blur grayscale, samples 32, intensity 0.12, and run that into another slope blur grayscale. Samples 32, intensity 2, and then we're going to power that with a purlin right here. So this purlin scale 3, disorder 0. I randomized that a couple times, and that just makes it ever so slightly warp. We want them to be pretty straight because we're going to match up our models to it, but I do like to have a little bit of variation in there. So run that up into there. So we go from this to that. And that's 32, intensity 2. Run that into our non-uniform directional warp. And intensity 1.23, warp angle here is the top left. Degree is 48. Warp angle multiplier 0.26. And then we go trail length, trail fade, and trail curve all at 1. Okay? Now we'll run that into a blur. Just blur it up a little bit because it's a little bit too hard. We don't want it to be quite that hard. Okay? So that's those three sections all the way up to this blur. The blur is 0.31, I believe I said that. So now let's start with our inner details. Now the inner details are kind of like the bumpiness on the insides of the boards. Okay? So we'll start by using a Grunge Map 2 Don't believe I changed any settings other than randomizing the seed here. We transform 2D, put 90% angle in there, or 90 degrees, to run horizontally. Okay, so we got Grunge Map 2 into a transform 2D at 90 degrees. Then we go down here. This is a Grunge Map 3, which we transform 2D at 90 degrees. But this one, I did do randomize the seed. Always randomize the seed for yourself, or you can copy my numbers if you want it to be exact. But like I said, always play with it. Run that transform 2D into a blur here, because we're using this as a mask to mask off this Grunge Map a little bit to not have it so strong in certain areas. So blur that at 2.99. We'll levels that. Pull the bottom left handle up a bit. You can see to get it not quite as dark in certain areas. Now if you want, you check the settings out here. If you click this little guy, these are the numbers. You can put those in if you want the exact way I levels it. Otherwise, just pull that one handle up. So then run the levels into this opacity mask of the blend, and you transform 2D into the foreground, right? And this will be the result. So it'll be really strong in some areas and less strong in some others. If you look here, here to there. Run this blend, which is at copy and 1, into this levels, because we want to kind of level that out. Pull the gray up, pull the white down. You can see here are the settings here if you want to put them in exactly. Otherwise, here's where I put the handles. Run that levels into a slope blur grayscale. Okay, just to kind of give it a little bit more crunchiness. We'll do black and white spots to power that. At scale 1, disorder 0, roughness 1 into there, into the slope. Run this slope blur grayscale into a directional blur, just to kind of stretch it out just a tiny bit to give it more of the wood grainy kind of features. We'll put this at intensity 0.54 and the angle is at 0 degrees. We'll run that directional blur into an invert grayscale just to flip it around. So white turns black and black turns white. And we'll run that down to another blend here. And what we're going to blend here is we're going to just blend a little bit of grunge concrete over the top. So we'll start with this grunge concrete here. It's just all the standard settings. Run that into a little bit of a directional blur, 0.77 at angle 0. And then we'll blend these two together, the invert grayscale and the directional blur. Blend copy, opacity 0.3. Okay? So that finishes off the inner details. So now we'll run this down and finish up our normal map. So run this blend down to a normal Sobel. And this normal Sobel is set at 1.6. Okay? And you can experiment with how strong or weak you want the crunchiness of the normal map using this. We'll run this into a normal combine because we're going to combine. Remember when we made this edge detail here, we finished with this blur. We'll run this blur up into its own normal Sobel because we want it to be a little bit different intensity. And this is 0.25 for intensity. Okay? And then we'll go to normal combine. We'll normal combine with this one over the top and this one on the bottom. You can see the result. The crunchiness with those bevels. And then we'll run that into our normal output. So that will be our actual normal map that we'll use. So you can suffix this by doing in the identifier here, NRM in caps. Okay? So that's a good start. We got our normal map done. Okay, so now we'll start working on our color map. So here's our color, and the first thing we want to do is our wood grain. So we'll put in a plasma. Here's the scale, 15, disorder 0.56. We'll invert that to get this result. And then we'll run it into a directional warp at strength 5,000. Okay? And down here, we'll create a Veroni. And this Veroni, these are the settings. I think the only one that's different is 5.67 for the scale, The rest I believe are all the regular settings, but be sure to check that if it doesn't look right. But it'll probably be fine even if it's not. Run that into this directional blur here. We'll blur that at intensity 121 and run that into the intensity input of our directional warp right here. And see, that gives us our nice wood grains. So now we take our wood grains and we run that directional warp. Remember, that was set at 5,000 into another warp. And this just adds a little bit of variation. This is very smooth here. You can see it's smooth. Now it kind of like gives it a little bit of crunchiness around the edges. So we'll run a clouds, scale 1. Doesn't seem like I set anything else, into the gradient input here and warp that. Okay. Now run this warp into a levels. And in this levels, it looks like I pulled some of these handles, like this one to the right, this one to the right, these ones down, and you can kind of try to copy where I pulled them. Otherwise, you can just put in these exact numbers here, and that's where I leveled it out. So now we'll run this levels into a blend. This blend is copy at opacity 1, and I'll show you we're blending a couple colors together. So we'll put in a uniform color here, and here's the hex for that, 91795X for that. Put in another uniform color here, 372E24, and we'll blend those two together in a blend using that levels to get our nice wood grain color here. Okay, and you can see it down on the bottom. Here, I'll even expand it. There we go. So now we'll run the results of this blend into another blend, and we're going to blend this other uniform color to it up here. So this uniform color is 2F3129. Then we'll blend this over the top of the other one, and we'll make a mask to do that. So down here we'll make a grunge map 2. Don't believe I changed any of the settings on that. The only thing is, here's the random seed number, but here's the other settings. I believe those are all the same as normal, just default. So we'll run this into a transform 2D just to put it vertical instead of horizontal. So, and I'll do that at 90-degree angle and run that up into the opacity mask of our blend here. So we go from this to this. A little bit of darkness here and there just to kind of add some variation, right? So now we'll run this blend, which is set at copy 0.3, right? This first blend here, I think we went over, it was just copy and 1. And this one is copy and 0.3, right? We'll run that into another levels. And this one, I just pulled these white handles down a little bit just to darken everything. Now you can see here are the settings. If you want to put the numbers in, there's more numbers just because we're leveling out of colors instead of a black and white. And then we'll run this levels into a vector warp color. And what that'll do is it'll just mix up our wood grain a little bit so that each board has a different grain in a different position. So how we do that, how we power that, we need a vector map to power it. How we get that is we go all the way back down to this flood fill we made, run that flood fill up to a flood fill to random color. Don't really need to do any of the settings with that, and just run that into the vector map. Now run the vector warp color into another blend, and we're going to just add some very minor color variation based on a map. So we're going to come back down to our flood fill here, run up to a flood fill to grayscale. Okay. Here are the settings for that. Luminance 0.48, luminance random 1, and here's my random seed, or you can just randomize it to see what you want for different color variations. Now remember, I don't know if I mentioned, down here for the flood fill, we want to make sure no failure mode is set to on, because I was getting some goofy results without that. So we run that into the flood fill grayscale, run that into a gradient map so we can mix that with color. So just gradient map with the color ticked. And then up here, that goes into the foreground, our other result goes into the background, and we just blend with soft light opacity 0.21. And that just gives boards just kind of a random luminance to them. Okay, so that finishes off our color, just kind of like our base color, right? So now we'll move that, take that all the way from this pin all the way down to a blend here. All right, and this blend is subtract and 0.1. All right, and what we want to have in the foreground for that is just some basic grunge. So I'm going to do a uniform color. So this is basic grunge setting. Uniform color, open that up. The hex is 765E4D for that color. Do another uniform color here. The hex is 869CA1. And we'll plug both of those into a blend with copy opacity 1. And we'll use for our opacity mask, we'll do a grunge map number 2. Doesn't look like I changed anything there. Transform that 90 degrees on the angle right here to make it horizontal. Pull that up into our opacity mask, and this is the result we're going to get for those two colors blended together. We're going to take that down to our blend that came all the way from the other color, and we'll do subtract and 0.1. And see, that kind of just starts giving some good, cool color variation to our guy. Right? We'll run that into another blend here, and this blend is copy at 0.15, and up here we'll make micro detail. So this is the micro detail section, and we'll do that with a grunge concrete. All these settings I believe are just the natural settings, and random seed is just 0, so this is just all natural into a gradient map so we can mix them together. Run that gradient map over on top of our blend here, and we'll put that at copy and 0.15. So there you go. You've got grunge, micro detail, into another blend. All right? We're just going to keep on cooking along. This just adds a little bit of graininess. If you see from this map here, it's basically just smooth. You add this, you add some graininess over the top of it, which is what we want. So now we're going to make a dirt color up here. So we'll do some more uniform colors. This color here, here's the hex C0B6A7 for that one. Another uniform color here, 503F32. We'll blend those two together with copy at opacity 1. Do a grunge concrete. This time I randomized it a little bit with the random seed, so it's not exactly the same. These are all the standard settings for that. So we'll take the results of this blend, run it back into this blend. This goes over the dirt color goes over the top of the one coming in, and then to power this we need a dirt. Okay, so to make that, we come all the way down, and remember this height for wear, this is where that's coming into play. Okay, the height for wear, if you remember, is the blend between our inner details and our edge details, and we've just blended them with multiply at 1. Okay, so the height for wear goes up into an ambient occlusion. We're in our dirt section, into an ambient occlusion HBAO. All right, I believe all the settings are normal in that. Run that into the ambient occlusion of a dirt. Now to get that dirt, you just search it. You hit the space bar like I just did. Look it up. It's not these dirt grunges here. It's this dirt right here. See, the one that has the pins. So let's delete that back out. Now, we run our height for wear into a normal Sobel at intensity 3, and then run the normal Sobel up into a curvature right here. Don't believe any of the settings of the curvature are any different. Run the curvature into the curvature of the dirt, and this should be your result here. You can see you get dirts in the cracks. This is a mask. Get dirts in the cracks and all like inside the bumpiness. So take that back up to remember that blend we were working on, and there you go. Now you mask off this and that inside of that. So that's for the dirt color down into that blend. Now that blend runs up into another blend again. Keep on blending, right? You can see the differences we're getting here. And this is detail color, okay? So do a couple uniform colors again like we've been doing and blending them together. So one color is 918A66. The other one is 99907D. We blend those two together using copy and opacity 1 and do a Grunge Map 11 for this one. I think all the settings are just the same. I randomized it a few times. Run that into that, and this is the result that we're going to use for our detail color. It's a lighter color. Run that down into the blend, and for this one we're going to put that at copy 0.23, but for the opacity mask, what defines where that gets blended, we have to go all the way back, and I'll show you. Go all the way back into our inner details. You remember we did this grunge map, transform 2D, and then there's this blend right here between where we masked that off. Go from that output all the way up to into the opacity of this one. Okay? And now you can see our color map is really starting to come together. Look like worn old wood. Okay? So now we'll take that and blend that into another blend with copy and 0.43. And now we're going to blend edge wear. So we're going to use that same detail color because that works out great. So we'll run that into the top of our foreground and this into the background. But now for opacity, we need edge wear. So to get edge wear, we'll go down here. And remember, we made a height for wear and we made a normal sobel that we ran into dirt. We'll take that normal sobel, which was powered at intensity 3, and run that into a curvature smooth. And see, this is our edge wear mask. So run that into a curvature smooth. Just all the standard settings for that. You can see kind of the results. And then take this curvature smooth, run that into an edge dirt. Okay? And the settings for these are relatively important, and you want to kind of try to mimic this. It should be mimicked, but they're important. Level 0.78, contrast 0, variation 0.3 for the edge dirt. And then we'll take the curvature smooth and run it into an edge wear. And here are the settings for that. Okay, level 0.8, contrast 0.56, threshold 0.996. This is kind of an important one. Edge width 0.16 and disorder 0. So that's the result you get. And you can see we've got the edge wear along the edges, right? So we'll take that up into a blend and we'll blend those two together using screen just to keep light on light, right? So now we take this edge wear that's right here. We run that up into the opacity mask that we were talking about before, this blend. See? Here's the detail color into the first blend, and here's the detail into the second. Now we blend it together, and now you can really see it coming together as far as like the edge wear and the dirt and all of that working together in our boards. We'll take that and we'll run that into another blend. And right here, I'm just doing kind of an overall overarching grunge. You can kind of change this up if you want. I used grunge leaks. It's not really important what you use. You could choose a different grunge map. I randomized grunge leaks, just a normal one. Transformed it, 90-degree angle, gradient map so we can mix it together, and then I blended it over the top. And that just kind of goes from this to that. It just kind of adds a little bit of variation in the color. You can choose different maps. This is the one that I liked for now, but I probably would go back and maybe look at different ones. This one I set to copy and opacity 0.05, just very, very faint over the top. Then we run that into a levels just to lighten it up after I tested it on Unreal. Needed to be lightened up a little bit. So we just pull this handle up here. Setting is down here. You can see all the settings. If you want to type those in, we run that into our base color output, and that's COL. So there's our color output. So there you go. Now we're done with our normal And we're done with our color. And now all we have to do is our roughness map. So for our roughness map, you can see here's our roughness map section. The first thing we need to go do is go all the way back to where we had our color. See our color here. There's this transform 2D on a Grunge map 02 that we run into this blend, first blend here. You can see where it is on the graph. Grab that, take that pin down, run it all the way around to here. And then we'll plug it into a levels where you adjust the handles a bit just to kind of make it more contrasty and much more light. So if you look at here's the numbers, if you want to put in the numbers, there's the numbers for that. Then we do a moisture noise down here. Scale 1, I believe all the settings are normal on that. Didn't even randomize it. Then we levels it out just to get this very faint variation you can see here. Now we blend this levels and this levels together in this blend here at overlay opacity 1. So we just kind of mix this light one over there very lightly. Run this into a levels and then lighten it up crazy. Pull this dark handle up a lot. Or you can look at these numbers here. Okay. Now we're going to run this into a blend with screen and opacity 1. And what we're going to blend here is we're going to take a result of our dirt. Remember the dirt we made here. Run that into a blend. And we'll take the result of this edge dirt blend and we'll run it up here into this blend. Now I said copy opacity 1, but that's not going to do anything. So that must have been a mistake by me. So we'll just change that to screen just to have white on white, right? And hopefully that looks okay. When we get into Unreal, we'll see. So run the output of that over top of this blend here. And this one's at screen 01. So you can take that levels, run this into there. And now you can see we have the white over the areas where we don't want it to be as shiny. Okay? So we're running the dirt and the edgeware mask into a blend, screen, and running that into here to add over our levels here. And then run this blend into our roughness output. And we call that ROUGH. So that should be all of our maps. So now let's export those out. And to do that, you just right click on this, export outputs, and you go pick your folder. I do BMPs, and it'll show you your name, the name, T-Wood Boards, and then what you named your identifiers here. And that's why I name them that, so I don't have to rename it. And I export them all into color space sRGB. That right now is the most efficient way to test. Otherwise, you can do raw in the future if you're going to do packing and stuff. So we'll export those outputs and close that down. And now we can head over to Unreal. Okay, so now here we are in Unreal, and I'm going to go over how to make the materials and import the textures. And you can see the results of our wood on our wood boards here. And I will, at the end of this, I'll show you and run through how to make the models for these boards. But these are modeled out, and you can kind of see them here. Let's kind of show you. And here's the result of our worn wood floor. I think that's pretty convincing. The nice thing is then you have the models, so you're not relying on parallax occlusion, or you're not relying on tessellation for the bump. It's just the models for the bump, so it's going to look pretty good from any angle in any circumstance. So here's the board, and I put it on the inside because this is mostly supposed to be an interior material, but we also made some wood boards here, and we're having it lit by the sun on the outside. We also made a little bridge, or whatever you want to call this thing, real quick, just to show you the power of when you make these boards. You could put together all sorts of things. You know, a lot of games have like walkways or all sorts of wood. Once you get these boards, you can make all sorts of neat stuff out of them. So first, let's talk about getting the materials, or the textures and the materials, into the Unreal. So first of all, I have this textures folder down here, and if you just right click, import to current folder, and that's how I got mine in, right there. You just browse to them. Or I'm going to just re-import here. I'll just click them and re-import just to make sure we have the exact same ones we just made because we exported. And there you go. There's your results for that. And in the future, we're going to make some cool decals to put over this so you can add some grunge. And we're going to also make some where you have the boards broken in half and you have splintering coming out. So this was a good base to get started before that. So let's go over how to make the actual material for this. Now the material is my normal bump material. Now I have a making master materials in Unreal tutorial. This one would be the M normal bump CRN here. So to create a material, just right click, create material right here. Name it M normal bump CRN. Now if you've done my other tutorial or my master one, you'll have that already. So you can just make the material instance. And I'll open this one up and show you quick all the settings for it. Now I'm going to run through this relatively quickly because we still have the modeling part to go. If you want to go more in depth and if you aren't as familiar with Unreal, I will link my Making Master materials in Unreal. Otherwise, I'm just going to explain what I've done here. So that gives people who don't want to go to that and have Unreal knowledge the ability to kind of look at this and kind of understand what's going on. But if you need like a step-by-step guide, then that would be in my Master Materials tutorial, which I'll link. Okay. But since we have to do the modeling, I kind of have to go through this quick. So this is color. I have a texture sampler that I turned to a parameter called color map. I use a 1 pixel by 1 pixel temporary texture for that. Here's a vector 4 that I set to a parameter with tint 1, 1, 1, 1. Then we multiply those together. Then we saturate that. And we turn that into base color there. My specular I changed to 0.35. You don't have to. You can leave it at 0.5. This is just a holdover of what I've always done. Roughness map. I have another texture sampler here, turned to a parameter. I use a gray texture just as a temporary 1 pixel one. Run that into input here, into our remap value range. We do a couple of values here, 0 and 1 for input low, input high. And then we do a couple of parameters here, 0 and 1 for target low and target high. That just allows us, and we name that roughness min, roughness max. That just allows us to adjust our roughness in our material instance by playing with the roughness min and the roughness max. Run that into roughness. Here's my normal. This is just to give us the ability to strengthen or weaken the normal map. I do a texture sample here for the normal map, pull it in, convert it to a parameter. I have a 1 pixel light blue color so it understands it's a normal map. Run that into breakout float 3 components, multiply that by normal strength. The red goes into one, multiply, the green goes into another, so you're only multiplying the red and green channels. Keep the blue the same, so run those multiplies into an append, run those into another append, and you put the blue, so we're just putting RGB back together. Run that into our normal, okay? Now, the other thing I want to give us the ability to do, and it's not going to necessarily be needed in this one, but in general, the ability to tile. So we do texture coordinate, take that into a multiply, couple values turned into parameters called tile U, tile V. Make sure to put 1 in for each of those. Otherwise, you're tiling 0 times. Append those together and multiply them. Run that multiply into the UVs of our texture samplers. So there you go. I know that was really quick, but this is a longer tutorial. I do have a tutorial that'll break that down and show you exactly how to do that. But just one note is to right click, you can search out nodes. Okay? So we have color, roughness, normal, and then tiling if you want. Okay, so let's shut that down and we'll go to the material instance. So right click on that one. There, M normal bump CRN, right click, create material instance. And that's how I got this MI, you can name it MI wood boards NB. And MI is material instance, wood boards, and then normal bump, just so I know like what I'm doing. So I'll open that up. And there you go, there's our stuff. And to put our maps in, you just tick these boxes for normal map, color map, roughness map there. And we'll go to our textures, just pull those puppies in. So the color, normal, roughness, and then this allows you to change the roughness min and roughness max. You don't want to change tile U and V for this one. So there you go. That's how you get your material that you're going to put on your model that we're going to make for the floor here. So now I'm going to head over to 3D Studio Max and we're going to make the simple board that you put this on so you have an idea of how to do that. Now I do understand you probably have a different modeling software, but no matter what modeling software you're using, this process is pretty easy. So I am going to kind of run through it and give you some ideas of other things you can do with the boards too in the future. So we're going to save that and we're going to head over to 3D Studio Max. Okay, so here we are in 3D Studio Max and you can see my boards here. They might be kind of blending in with the gray just because of the color that they are. Here, let's just select them really quick so you can kind of see them. And we started off by making just a very simple board, right? Very simple, and I'll show you how I did that. Then we take that and we UV them all differently so they have a different top and bottom and stuff like that. So then I made these variations of boards with different UVs. And then I added a slice in them. You can see each of them has a different slice in a different position, like that. Then I took them and I noised them. And now this is like a personal preference setting. I did it very slightly. So that just kind of randomized them, and I'll show you. But I put a noise modifier on them, and I put 4 in each of the strengths. But like let's go to one that has one in the middle. Okay, so let's say I strengthen that up to like 20. Well, maybe not 220, but 20, right? And then you can change the seed, and you can get all sorts of different crazinesses for your board. Now you wouldn't probably go that much, but I'm just showing you that I'm taking it from being very straight and adding a very slight change to it with doing the 4, right? And you want to randomize each different board. So you just go and just change the seed from each board to board. And then I took that and I merged that together so that we have all our boards separate, and then I put them all into one and I called boards build from. So this is the end result that I'm going to want to build other things from. Okay? So that you can add more or less. If you want to add more of these slices, you can add more, and then you can make more variation. You can do all sorts of different things, but I'm going to show you just this for very simplicity's sake, because we're really just trying to make the wood floor, and we need them to be pretty square still with each other so we can put them together. Then I took these boards and I built this wood floor with it. See? And then I capped off I had to cut some of the edges, but then I capped them off. And I'll actually show you how to make the wood. And this is the wood floor that we're using, and we're kind of multiplying it across so that we can use it. And here I also made this goofy looking structure really quick, just to show you that this is a great way. You start with one piece and then you can build a whole bunch of other stuff down the road. Okay? So I'm going to show you quick how I made one board. Now the modeling process for something like this is very simple. You can go much more complex, but we're trying to keep it as simple as possible just for the sake of the video. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is add in a plane. Let's just do a plane 300 by 300 with no segments or anything, just a straight up plane. Okay, and there's our plane there. Let's kind of move some of this other stuff out of the way so we can get it. Let's put this at 0, 0, 0. All right. And there we go. There's our plane, right? So, and then we can add our material, which I added in here in my materials. I just added a bitmap into my materials, changed the roughness a little bit so it wasn't so shiny. This is just a very temporary thing so we can understand what we're doing. Pull that onto our plane. And now we can just make our model quick. So let's say, let's convert this to an editable poly, select edges, and then just turn Swift Loop on. I'll kind of zoom in, and let's just choose a couple boards to make our board out of. Let's do like here. Let's do like there. And this do like there. Let's do like there. Let's do these side ones. We're going to need 2 of those. This, that, that, and that. Okay? And now, turn Swift Loop off. Let's just delete out the ones we don't need and not move them like I just did. So that, and that, I believe is what we were going to do. So now, like, we'll just decide, okay, so this is the front. So let's rotate this one. Make sure angle snap is on. Rotate that one 90 degrees that way. Rotate this one 90 degrees that way. And then maybe just flip this one all the way around. Like that. I'll just go to object properties. Let's backface color this so I don't see the back faces. And then let's just take these, move that one down to there. Move this one to there. Go to the back. Move that one to there. Now these verts aren't going to match up because they're all different sizes. So we just want to do a target weld here, from there to there. And then the vert from here to here. And that's our basic board shape. We can grab our verts, that, weld that together. There we go. And then so now that's mapped. So you can see that's mapped correctly. So we'll just cap that on the side. And then cap this there. Okay. Now let's just unwrap this quick. Unwrap UVW. Gonna move that over. Let's grab the 2 faces that we need to map now. Just do a flat mapping quick. Pull those out. Instead of the checker, we can put on our wood so we can see. And then let's just scale this down. Something like that. Maybe make it a little bit bigger than that. Yeah, maybe like that. Then find a good place to stick them. Still a little big. Yeah, let's scale them down a little bit. There, that looks pretty good. That looks like a pretty good spot. All right, so is that the way we want the wood grain to go? Yeah, I believe so. That looks good. So we'll just collapse that. So like I said, this is really simple, obviously. So we'll go down here, clear all. We're going to auto smooth it just so that it's all smooth. And then we'll add some edges in to kind of correct this, the weird smoothing. So we'll do Swift Loop. Just go bonk, bonk, bonk. Just do the corners. And then bonk, then bonk. That should be pretty good. And then we got to do this one here like that. All right, so that should be all of the loops we need. So that's basically how to model the board, right? Like it's very, very, very simple. You can obviously do more complex work, but I just wanted to show you something really fast. And then that would be what I use to build those other things from. And I'll show you, I mean, we can do the quick slice here and see that's how I put the slices in. See, then if you want, you can go to the noise modifier, and then you just put in what I was putting in before, but let's just do 10 just to make it so you can notice. 10 on every angle, and then just mess with the seed, and it'll kind of noise it up a little bit. You can make your board not perfect. Okay, so you can add more faces, less face. You can do all sorts of different things. You can make these vary and angle, all sorts of stuff. But for our wood floor, this is kind of what I did. Just real quick, we'll do 4 centimeters there, and then so you'd want to obviously UV them differently so they have different fronts and backs and different sides and stuff. And I also I'd probably not have it this thick. So I did make them thinner, I remember. So you could just kind of scale it. And that's why we made it. It's squishing this one will be fine still. Squishing these will be fine. That's why we made them a little bit smaller. If we would have kept everything really big when you scale stuff, it probably wouldn't have scaled quite as nice. But there you go. That's generally the basic idea of how to make that board. Now you obviously don't see any of the bump or anything in this version, but then we take that and then we make the things that I was talking about before, where we start just doing the UVs, adding the cuts for all of them, adding the variations, merging everything together, and then merging it together so that these are the boards that we would build from in the future. And then in the future, you can build all sorts of different things. So we built this floor, and then we built this thing here. So hopefully that's pretty clear. So we'll save that and we'll head back over. I mean, of course, with that, you would export to an FBX, and then you would import, and here are my meshes. So you can open that up, and you apply your material up here to the mesh, right? You can see the result here in just the standard lighting, right? But in here, I added a little bit of lighting variation so we could see that with different colors, and then just the sun out here and this deal here. Okay, so I think that's basically all we're going to go over today. Hopefully, I kind of hit everything I wanted to, and so it's pretty clear. So the idea here is, you know, we do a lot of materials for like wood floors, and we just make a material and plop it on a flat plane. This is a little bit more effective, and it really doesn't cost a lot to do now. We can render these types of polygon counts without a problem. And you know, you can do this even for wood floors or even sometimes brick walls now. Now you don't even need to have, you can have the individual bricks as long as you're really cognizant about how you're keeping your polygons under control. So anyways, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I want to go over today. So in the future, we're going to do some decals that we can put over this. We're going to kind of flesh out stuff. Reminder, this painted wall we've made in a previous tutorial also. I'll link that in the description. We'll do some trim sheets. So we can do like maybe a trim around here, a trim around the top, and maybe we'll expand on this with some decals and stuff in the future. So that's about all I'm going to go over. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'm very small, struggling to get any kind of views. So if you could give me any kind of interactions, views, whatever, like, subscribe, that sort of thing, that'd be great. I really appreciate it. I really do appreciate you watching. I really hope you guys have a great day, and take care of yourselves. Have a good one.